I'm Eric Barden.
I'm Amy Barden.
And this is Bombardened. In today's podcast, we're chatting with Patrick Arney, the Executive Director of Weld, a fantastic program that assists folks coming out of jail and prison and reentry back into community.
Yeah, I met Patrick Arney because I know Amy King, right? And you'll recall that Amy started Weld. And then eventually, I believe that Patrick went through that program to reenter after a number of years in and out of the criminal justice system. And now he's running it. He is brilliant. I remember the first time I met with him and a few of the other leaders at the organization were in there, and they were telling me their stories, but I was asking questions because I actually don't know anything about drugs, right? And asking, why would people use this and this? And the language, it all got very colorful. And when I left that day, I don't think it was Patrick, but one of them said, "You're the dopest government person we've ever talked to." And I definitely have not been called dope. So
well,
it was...
I think you're pretty dope.
Do you think so?
I do. You're the dopest.
Yeah, it's not the same coming from you. It's not the same.
I don't have the credibility. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
that is the whole point. Patrick is, lived experience and all that, but he's also a brilliant mind. He's a really genuinely thoughtful person. And the program that they run is having a lot of success. So I look forward to the opportunity to get into the weeds with him on why that is.
Yeah.
Let's go. Welcome, Patrick Arney. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I think first and foremost, I'm just honored to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Well, we're really excited to have you. We talked a little bit in the intro about about you and about Weld, but we want to hear straight from you. So, what is first of all, what is Weld?
Yeah.
That you are the executive director of? Is that your official title?
Yeah, executive director. Weld is not an acronym. Unfortunately, because I'm asked that often. Weld, the second definition of Weld, when it was founded, was, if you look in the dictionary, it means to bring together in a harmonious whole. So what we really do, at the end of the day, is comprehensive support for people reentering community. And, that looks a lot of, it looks like housing, it looks like on-ramps to the economy, like workforce training, workforce development. We provide jobs, we provide case management, clinical support, and really just, love people up through the process of reacclimating to society.
Yeah.
So these are folks coming out of jail, mostly coming out of prison?
Yeah,
sometimes homeless too, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We're number 3 in the nation of homelessness in King County. So we trail, as you guys know, New York City and Los Angeles. So we're second in unsheltered homelessness. So the problem's so pronounced and profound that, while our call to action is people that have a criminal history and have been involved in the legal system, about half the people that come to us directly from homelessness, meaning they were released at some point, they're back on the streets, and they were, dropped into either the same circumstances in which they came from in the first place, or sometimes worse circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So folks were out in community, got themselves jammed up with law enforcement, went to jail, didn't fix any of the things that led to their problems to begin with. And then when they come out, if they find themselves back in homelessness, that's one of the places that they come to you from.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
We've got to make changes, got to do something different.
Exactly. And I think it's important to note, too, that we offer sober living. So, if you look at, the data shows, and, it's tough to track data sometimes on this, crimes of despair, related to substance use disorder, but 85% of the people incarcerated are thought to be drug related to some extent. So we knew, and I knew from personal experience, if you go to treatment and you have access to resource, and not all treatment centers are the same, you know what I mean? And if you go to a nice treatment center, what they're going to tell you is if you want to continue on your journey of recovery, you're going to move into sober living after you're at treatment. They're like this is the easy part. This is the pause. We're going to give you some coping mechanisms, but the work starts when you leave and you need to go to sober living. When I knew, it was that is not available for people that don't have resource or don't have access to money. So in some instances, those sober livings can be upwards of $2,000 a month, $2,500 a month, $10,000 a month. $50,000 a month if you're in a place like LA and they're really bougie. So we wanted to create that for people that were coming out of institution, because we also know that jails, prisons, and institutions are a form of intervention for people that either lack resources or outright refuse resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people are in the program right now? How many Weld members?
There's about 220 active members at the moment. We got about 107 people in our housing program. And then we've got about 15 people out at work with the city of Burien right now. Everybody gets access to case management, which is like a super, super important piece of what we do, so we have partnerships with the University of Washington and Seattle University, both their School of Social Work and their nursing program.
Yeah.
So there's constant investment and conversation between the members and the case management team. And then, of course, we have peer support throughout the organization.
Now, you've met our friend Dave DeRozier, who's running Other Side Academy. Mm-hmm. You're both connected. He is another one of the people who really helped me to understand why these programs need to be peer-led.
Yeah.
They're not going to be as successful if they're not. So tell me about that.
I mean, it's real difficult to, first and foremost, like talk about some of the stuff we've been through and or be told how to, conquer that stuff without being given access to resource. But also, like, we know each other. Like, I can call someone on this shit pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
that's what we heard from Dave.
Yeah. And there's a levity to it. We were speaking about this earlier. Like, I mean, almost like where most people will hear our stories and like, somebody needs to call the police. This is scary. Like for us, like, we can laugh at these things. And I think you have to in some instances.
And isn't it just, it's a credibility factor, right? I mean, it's like if I'm telling somebody how to do something that I've never done, I don't have the credibility that somebody like yourself who's walked that path and overcome those obstacles, and then now you tell me this is how I did it. Well, now that means something.
There's no question. We're credible messengers, and like just winning the confidence of an individual in a matter of moments. You sit down, you sit with them, like, I've been exactly where you've been, and this is how I got out, and this is what we're going to do, and this is how we navigate the barriers which exist. And, at the end of the day, it's really like community and investment in community and being accountable to the collective. I like to ask people, like, I know a lot of people in recovery from substance use disorder, and most people just kind of blend into the economy once they get sober. It's not like people go to work and be like, I have recovered from crack cocaine. But it happens, you know what I mean? And so the question is always like, what separates you from the people that are living houseless on the streets or in a tent or cycling in and out of institutions? And the answer I inevitably get back from people in recovery is always the same. It's community and accountability.
Yeah. That was something that struck me that you say Weld members. When I was on site the first time, that it did feel like a family. And I thought about that when we permanently break the cycles, how often it's because we forge strong connections and we've got people around us who will catch us, right? If we start to backslide.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're my people, and there's no difference between like me and the individual I'm speaking to that just came through the front door. We had we have a month of classes at Weld. It's curriculum based. It's financial literacy, digital literacy, crisis management, dealing with internal conflict, all the way to like how do I catch the bus? You know what I mean? Like real simple things. So graduation was yesterday, and it's great and, fantastic. And there's tears in the audience and all the things. And I walked in because I hadn't been part of it, this month of students. And I look and like, there's somebody I did time with.
No kidding.
Yeah. I'm like, whoa, hey, buddy. It's beautiful. So like, there's not a lot of separation. The separation is like, I think like the access to resource, I did the internal work, but like at the end of the day, there was so much help, so much investment in me in particular to get where I'm at today. And like where I'm at today is just like nobody was betting on that. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so tell us the backstory, because of all the people I know currently, I would not rank you likely to ever have committed a crime or to have been hostile or aggressive, or I can't even imagine it actually.
Yeah.
So
I think I can.
You
see a little look in his eyes.
I appreciate both answers, actually. My story is one of arrest, clearly, and like, meth is a pretty messed up drugs. So I can remember specifically like being out of my mind on those things, like doing things that I probably never would have been involved with otherwise. But like to go further back, like I think, 90s, a lot of fun. I had a great time. I didn't go to school. You know what I mean? I was like out on the streets, like hanging out with my friends. So, but it was fun. You know what I mean? Like, to be honest with you, like but it was leading me in a certain direction. So I got, I fell victim to an assault in '99, and my skull was fractured. And like, I probably deserved it, to be honest with you. I was, I wasn't exactly a kind person at the time, and I was prescribed Oxycontin. So, so this is in December of 1999, and I had already had like some of the behaviors that might lead to alcoholism at some point, amongst other problems. Obviously, I wasn't taking care of the business I needed to be taken care of on a personal level. But that really like just launched me in a direction that I didn't see coming. So for the better part of like from 99 to 2013, like that was, drugs, alcohol, cycling like in and out of treatment centers, sometimes homelessness, breaking the heart of my family along the way and the people that cared about me. So, and that's an important note. Like every relationship that I really cared about and wanted to foster, like I was terrorizing those people because they didn't want to see me like that. So, that's kind of the backstory. I was lucky enough to get sober and, accept like help, actively ask for help in August of 2013.
Okay.
And that's kind of where this journey began.
So it was really like Oxy and then 14 years.
14 years. Yeah. Oxy, Oxycontin. And then I was one of the first people in Washington State on Suboxone, which is, kind of an interesting thing to say out loud. And I think it was 2003, there was 3 doctors in the state that were prescribing it, and they could have 3 patients apiece as they were trying to figure out if it was going to be made available to the general public. So I was one of those people. I remember, like, I'll never forget it. Actually, they're like, you have to come in. You have to come in without any opiates in your system for like 12 hours. It's a really big deal. Like that's hard to do. So like I did it, and I was so sick. Like on a gurney at Swedish in downtown Seattle, and they're like, "How are you feeling?" And I'm just like, "Dude, don't ask me that question." But he handed me one of the pills. He's like, "Here, put this under your tongue." And I thought it was. I was just like, "Dude, another pill. We'll see what this does." But like, it's like, wow.
And what do you mean, just physical relief?
Yeah, the physical relief. Yeah, because what it does is it'll fill the receptor sites in your head for that were filled with the other opiates. So you do get some physical relief from the withdrawal. That's exactly what happens.
And you were in a frame of mind at the time where you wanted to get clean.
Wanted to get clean. So this is like, again, this is 2003. Clearly I didn't get clean at the time, and I was on it for a while. But I mean, I think like, and I am a proponent for all things. Like what I've learned, like working in this sector, is in 2003 with the opioid pandemic really starting to kick off and take hold. Systemically, we weren't set up to combat it then. Mm-hmm. So in 2025 with fentanyl, it's like it's a tsunami coming at us, and systemically we're still not set up to combat it. So I'm not. I think Suboxone can be a tool, in the tool belt, of course, and I would argue it probably kept me alive at times when I would have otherwise been on the street. But I got on that in 2002 or 2003. The data from what I've read, very effective for a few years, but you do need to start treating like the underlying issues.
Yeah.
So for me, like I wasn't doing that, right? And then you start dabbling in it, and it's like, it's almost like for me, it was like a science experiment. Like, what if I try a little bit of this, a little bit of that?
Oh, really?
This? Yeah, and and then it was like I'm off and running again. If I'm on the Suboxone, I was doing meth, and if I was off the Suboxone, I was doing heroin, and it was rough. And it is, I will say this for the experience of like medical treatment or medical assisted treatment, it is shocking to the system to feel okay for multiple years or 18 months, whatever, however long you've been taking them, and then you take those drugs away and you're immediately dope sick again like you were 2 years prior. So it's almost like a time machine that's taking you right back to the same space you were in. That's why I really think, at Weld, we talk to people all the time, like really treating those underlying issues and kind of understanding what that looks like and having a plan to like, if you are going to come off it, what that's going to look like. And I think, the doctors, I think, are doing an okay job with that. But again, I'm one of the first people that ever took it in Washington State.
So for people to come to Weld, can they be on Suboxone?
Yeah, we do work with people on Suboxone. I think, legally, I even think we have to at this point. But what we found is that, recovery looks different on everyone. It's not always linear. Mm-hmm. There's all shapes and sizes to it. But we actively work with people to try to aspire for, someday getting off perhaps, or if they're not going to get off, like I said, working on the underlying issues that really, because like you could take, for me, and again, I didn't get sober then, so it was like a long 11 years.
Yeah. And
we can go into more detail about what that looked like, but it doesn't take away the antisocial behavior. And that's like the bigger issue, at least for me and someone in recovery. It's like I could take all the drugs off the street, I can't. But if I could take all the drugs off the street in a second, you're still going to see the antisocial behavior that's developed over decades and decades.
Yeah.
One of the things, it's so interesting what you're talking about. We've talked to folks who say that exact thing, that treating that drug addiction is often the self-medicating some other issues. Yep. So a person is having had trauma or is having certain social issues or other issues, and then they self-medicate with the use of drugs. And so then the idea is, and then MAT, or medically assisted treatment for drug addiction, is also super controversial. There's people that say, no, it's horrible. Mm-hmm. Just you got to get sober and you got to do it the hard way. We have other folks who say, Suboxone for life type stuff.
Absolutely.
And then there's a whole bunch of folks in the middle, and I've kind of when I learned something from somebody or a study or whatever, I'm not like, I don't know the answer, but I can tell you that it seems to me that like there might be room for Matt to play a role in this thing and to help folks, but it shouldn't be that shouldn't be the finale. That shouldn't be the oh, great, we got you on Suboxone, next.
Yeah, no, agreed, completely. And I mean, just from my personal experience, what I can tell you is like, I would not be the executive director of a nonprofit helping, at this point, like thousands of people if I was on Suboxone. That's just my truth. Like I took it, I was pretty dulled out. I wasn't very, I wasn't getting up in the morning trying to do a lot of stuff with myself, not very goal orientated through that time. It was like, okay, I'm not going to die today. Now, so to your point, like what is the outcome we're shooting for people, right? And I would argue it's like we want people to thrive at the end of the day.
Right.
Absolutely, 100%. And to do that, we need them to stay alive. So I think there is space for both. But yeah, so that's how we treat it at Weld. It's like we'll have conversations around it. People come to us. We encourage them to do everything they can do to stay sober, especially for that initial like few months. But there are things like Vivitrol shots that act in much the same way, without the withdrawal. You can win from coming off Suboxone. So there's other things you can do. But I'm not a doctor or a research analyst or a scientist, so I try to stay out of like all that. It's like
you don't want to prescribe stuff, but you have some real life observations and experience. So
for sure.
So what do you think, looking back, what was the disconnect? Because it sounds like, again, you talk about antisocial behavior. Sounds like that was evident early, right? If you're not going to high school, if you've sort of disengaged with conformed society early.
I think it was, I mean, so this is the 80s, right? Yeah. Like I'm diagnosed with ADD. They're figuring that out. It's really interesting, actually. Like if I look at all my friends and I still talk to a lot of the same people that, they're still alive or not locked up. We were all like kind of latchkey, diagnosed with this or that. And like for me, it was drugs, like for sure. You know what I mean? Like I started using those at a very early age. I think I was probably like in the 6th grade. I started drinking and smoking weed. And, that took, for somebody like me that's, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, like that became the primary purpose. I'm like, you guys go to school, I'm going to go to the U District and I'm going to figure out how to get a bag of weed and I'll see you guys after. Like that was really what it looked like for me for a long time.
But looking back, I mean, do you feel like that was some form of rebellion, or were you bored, or were you thrill seeking, or?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I was angry.
Yeah.
I was inherently angry. Like I think you hear people talk about that often. But like I remember like there were things systemically that stuck out to me that didn't seem right as a kid, and I latched onto those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, no question. And afraid. I think being afraid too. Yeah. I think those two things played a huge role, in how I interacted with the world and how I try to buffer it.
Yeah.
Now, but I think it's important to say though, I don't know that I was going through anything that other kids don't go through, and I don't know if I wouldn't have come out of that if I hadn't been introduced to like the harder drugs later on in life. Like, I don't know what it would have looked like. I have an idea, but yeah, these are things I'm sure a lot of kids deal with, and this is the route I took.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by that. That you could, most of my career was around child welfare and foster care, and how you can have almost identical circumstances for different people, and what are those X factors? Like there's some people who forge this different type of commitment in the struggle. It's like, I see all of this, I want to do the opposite. And I think that's what we struggle with from a policy perspective. It's like, you can't assign, this is the cause, this is the effect of that, and then this is the solution. We're just more complicated than
that. Like, or, the right mentors in place, or, things like that. It may have been different. But yeah, we see that often.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting is this sort of, and I know it's not a conflict, but it appears to be this conflict between sort of understanding where people are, and then what you mentioned, community and accountability.
Yeah.
Those things are not exclusive. You can do both of those things at the same time. And I think it's so important. So many folks that we've talked to who have lived experience, who suffered or were I hate that, framing, the victimization, that we're addicts. Talk about how important having purpose is, valuing their own self-worth, and then accountability. And so, we talked to Stacey James, who's a mom surviving the death of her child. And, one of the things that she said was that she was just such a mom, and she was treating her then adult son like he was still a kid, because she was the mom and she was just loving. And she wishes that she would have been able to go back and implement boundaries and structures and whatnot for him. What are your thoughts in terms of, you mentioned community and accountability, but I also know that that it's not linear and that folks just don't get better in a straight line. So what is the answer? What is the...
No, I mean, I think everything you talked about is essential. And God bless that mother that you spoke to. That's sad and heartbreaking to think about that as a father. I think, with the accountability piece, how that plays out. So I'll just give you an example. Like, I'm a big proponent of restorative justice. 95% of the people incarcerated today will one day be released. That can click up to sometimes 97%, depending on who's in office. So it's a question of like, what kind of neighbors do we want when they get out of prison, essentially, right? So there has to be some restorative nature inside the incarceral system. Otherwise, we're kind of fucked. Like, this is part of my language. And for people with substance use disorder, like that restorative aspect that we're talking about, that looks like access to care and access to those services we're talking about. Through that is accountability. And, this is kind of a weird example, but like I see it you can see it sometimes in the city. I think the pendulum's starting to swing. But like, if I was watching like My 500-Pound Life. Have you ever seen that show?
Mm-mm.
Terrible show. Don't recommend it.
Don't watch it.
But it's like these morbidly obese people, and this man's laying there, he's like 600 pounds, and his mom is bringing him like 400 chicken nuggets, and she's like, I can't believe my son is so sick. Why is this happening to him? And she's bringing him this food on a daily basis. And, you know, I sit and watch things like that, and I do think you can love somebody to death. There's no question. And I'm not talking about the mother, of course, but like I'm specifically talking about like the city in which I live, and like some of the things that I see on a daily basis. I know, you know, every time I see somebody like nodded out on the side of the road, there's a couple of things happen. One, I'm like, that's as good as it gets. I get that. Like, as somebody in recovery, like that's what you're going for. You want to be nodded out like oblivion, and you can't understand the words coming out of my mouth. It's the altitude on which I like to fly when I'm using drugs. So there's that part, and understanding that they actually have no agency to their actions. So how do we help provide them with the agency to actually make a decision for themselves? Like, that is the question, and that's
beautiful.
It takes accountability. Is locking someone up the ideal thing to do? Probably not. Is it the best we can do right now? It might be. And I mean, I think the bigger conversation to have with people, and this is one of the reasons I love working with you, is like, can we do better? Like, it just starts there. Like, can we do better? And like, if we can, let's have a conversation on what that might look like for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know too many Patricks at this point. So I'm getting a little more assertive and a little more strident because I'm starting to understand. I always said people can change, but astonishing potential. You know, again, the folks that I know with some of the worst backstories are currently the best leaders, and I would say there's the most integrity in these communities, and that's been really interesting too. I never knew that, but I think that we've been in a couple prison alternatives, or you know, in the space of corrections where people are well down the change path. And man, the degree of honesty and authenticity and vulnerability, I have never seen anything like it. I certainly don't see it in my normal, you know, going through my day.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, you I was so beaten down by the time I re-entered community and got sober. Like I had a garbage bag with like some shoes and, you know, some stuff in it, and like, you know, I was trying to find a place to live. I remember I went into treatment. I had OD'd before I went into treatment, and it was pretty bad. And I remember I called my dad, and my dad lived in Idaho at this time, and I said, "Hey, man, I think I'm gonna die." And I was like, and you know, I don't care anymore, but you might care. And he was like, I'm gonna come pick you up, and we're gonna figure this out. So him and my mom actually helped me get into Sundown Treatment Center. When I got out, he came and picked me back up, and he dropped me off at a hotel like near Aurora. And he's like, I don't think he even thought I was gonna make it. Like, by this time I'm like 34 years old. I'm like, I'm past the point of saying, I want to go to treatment. Will you help me? Just by the grace of God. Like, my mom, it's not like my mom's ultra successful. Like, she was a lunch lady at in elementary school. She like pulled out of her retirement to get me in this treatment center. And even I remember when I got to the treatment center, I still like had the audacity, like, because there's so much ego is going on when you're like in late stage addiction. I'm like, oh yeah, this is my money I'm paying with, even though it's my mom's money. You know what I'm saying? And like all the things. But I remember he dropped me off in Seattle. He paid for one night in a hotel room. And then I was sleeping in like a kind of a trap house on Aurora, this garbage bag, looking for a place to live. So I started knocking on like sober house doors, like, is there any opportunity that I can even sleep on the couch, please? I don't want to go back to, the way I was living. But I say that to say, like, through all that, like there becomes like an honestness with yourself when you're stripped of like everything.
Yeah.
I think that there's just this point in time where you realize like it's all you really have at the end of the day. It's like your ability to be honest and your ability to be close to others. And I like one of the things to your point in its entirety. I talk about this at work all the time. Like, it's not about us. Like, the work we do is not about me at all. It is about the people behind me. So I better be on point with my word at all times with what I'm doing. And that's kind of how we try to operate at Weld. Is like, we know on paper, you'd be like, whoa, felon, 122-time felon. Running, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, we have to run with this, and we have to do it impeccable. Yeah. And we have to always do what we say. And, we may fall short sometimes with like what we're the goals on which we and the standards on which we hold ourselves to, but we're still overshooting the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find with Weld in particular, and with many others, the integrity of the sober community is superior to most of the people that I've dealt with in very professional, high level places. Just the integrity of folks that have been, down and fought and clawed their way out of that.
Yeah.
There's some integrity that comes out of that. And I want folks to understand this too.
Yeah.
Like you come off like so super chill and you're so understated. And, you've just done a great job of kind of articulating where you came from and what you've done. But I want people to understand that, your daily deal isn't like chatting with folks about, their addiction issues. Like you're grant writing and you're working with governments and you're running a major operation.
Yeah.
And so here's a guy who had a garbage sack with some stuff in it and pounding door to door. And yet on the other side of that, when you were able to get through that, you're producing at the highest levels now. I mean, you are running a phenomenal organization.
Thank you.
As its leader. And I just want people to understand this isn't a guy who, society was able to resurrect him and, now he's
it's just that easy.
Sweeping, parking lots by hand or something. I mean, this guy who's running a major organization.
I did some of that though.
That's where the authenticity comes from.
What's funny is that first, so I was terrified when I was new professionally. The first 4 years I was sober. Truly, because like on paper, again, like it's like, whoa. And the last full school year I completed was the 7th grade. And now
that was my next question.
Yeah, I'm an avid reader, and like there's things that are saving grace for me, and I have a lot of mentors and all that stuff. But I remember early on, this is the weirdest thing, but I was cleaning up dog poop. Like that was my first job.
That was your job.
That was and I have a stomach that will turn and I will throw up if I smell. So I remember I was in this backyard and it's like, I got like 6 months sober. I've got so many court commitments. I'm looking at a possible prison sentence. I'm in and out of municipality and anger management and, this, that, and the third. Like all the things they can throw at you are being thrown at me, and rightfully so. So I got to take this like small-time job with this guy that does like yard maintenance. And he's like, all right, drop you off in this road. This woman has show dogs. You're going to clean up the dog poop. And I remember sitting in the backyard, just like, I'm driving. I'm just like, all right. I was like, God, whatever you got for me, I'm gonna keep doing this. So there was some of that, and I think today, like, thank you for reminding me why I stay up late at night sometimes. But the efficacy part that I talked about, whenever I meet with elected officials, it's the same thing. Like we drop data off on their desk. Like, here it is.
Yeah.
Like, here's the failure. Here's the successes. This is what it looks like to work with us.
Well, when we were in D.C. Meeting with a couple different Congress people, it was entertaining to me because it was like, tell Patrick hi.
Oh,
like people are so happy that I know you and I support you. And so again,
that's so good.
I think what was underneath Eric's comment is that he really rejects the idea that lived experience alone makes you a great leader or a competent business manager. That you have your perspective informed by your own experiences and your understanding of these cultures and, the assumptions that folks have. But you are extraordinarily talented.
Thank you.
And thank God that talent has found its way to this space.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and then the other part of that is too, and I appreciate that framing.
Let's just praise him for a while.
I know. Let's just
He does not.
I'm gonna just cry. Start crying over here. It's okay.
But I think also my point is that when you drive down Third Avenue in Seattle, that guy, in Nirvana, right, who's slumped over and living his best life, that could be Patrick.
Yeah.
That's my one of my mentors passed away last year. And I remember he said that to me. One of the things he said before, because I have cognitive dissonance around it now. I'm a homeowner and I'm a father, and there's homeless people across the street. And I was talking to him. I was like, man, I just want my daughters to play. And, I'm an active member of a 12-step group. And he was just like, be careful, Patrick. One of those guys might be your sponsor someday. And it's exactly right. Like, those very well could be our leaders. That is the truth. So
yeah.
I want to it was weird. I won an award from Congressman Smith's office for
Mm-hmm.
champion of justice in his district, and I didn't say this when I won the award, but I was arrested like 28 times in his district.
Yeah,
It's
that's
incredible.
amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
It was just wild.
Yeah.
I've got that in my office. So it's been a plot twist a little bit, but I thank you for what you said, and I do agree. Like, there are exceptional people in all walks of life, and
Yeah.
it really is up to us to like invest in those people, and that doesn't always look like, being as kind as possible. Sometimes it's actually challenging people
that's
and
right.
providing boundaries for people.
Yeah.
And like, this is how this is what work actually looks like to
Yeah.
get in these places.
Yeah, I often bemoan this sort of culture of low expectations we seem to have developed, that this is the best we can hope for somebody.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's right.
Good is the enemy of great.
Yeah.
They say that sometimes. I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that first day that you and I met, and actually, I think it was the closest I came to tears on the job to date, to that
I'm
point.
get you. We'll get you.
It-
You can come down to the graduation.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Actually, later it was drug court graduation.
Yeah.
The first time it was not.
Yeah.
Don't wear mascara to that anymore. But what really captured me, and we had been in a group, so I hadn't heard as much from you personally. You remember I was parked in the neighborhood, and Eric would approve. He walked me to the car because I'm like, no, I'm fine, I'm good.
She was yeah. I was like, all right.
He was like, I'm just gonna walk with you.
Yeah.
And so he walks me to the car, but on the way we were talking about scheduling, and he was sharing that he was going to go on paternity leave, and that this was his second baby, and just told me a little bit about his personal life. And then he just paused for a moment, and he said, I felt like when I got out, when I got clean, I remembered wanting to be a husband and a father.
Mm-hmm.
And by that point that I was clean, I felt like that season had just passed. I had missed it. And then, you talked about how miraculous it is that you're getting ready for your second baby. You've got this family. And it was so touching to me.
Thank you.
It was just amazing. And then later at a Weld event, when I met your wife, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Because she's like this rock star, supermodel,
Yes,
incredible
beautiful.
mom. And I thought, I just love this.
I really outkicked my coverage. Overshot
both.
Yes, sir. I mean, and the miraculous part of that now is that I'm awake for this conversation because we have an 8-month-old.
That's right.
And I'm like a 46-year-old father now. But I think that is a really important point because while we talk about all these things that matter, the accountability, the community, the collective, I do still believe the one thing that pulls people through at the end of the day is love.
Yeah.
So you have to have that, your hand on that at all times. So there has to be that sense of compassion. And, for a lot of guys exiting institution or women, it's children, right?
Yeah.
That could be their anchor. But there is that piece that I think it has to be centered around that because if people don't have hope, they're not going to do the work.
Yeah.
So I often talk about it like you got to pat them on the back and stab them in the heart in equal measure, as you're talking to someone. Like this is the hard truth, and also you're doing a good job, or we're going to get there together.
So what would you say
awesome.
about like self-love? Because when I hear you talk, I mean, and again, even that story about your parents, right? That is exceptional, unconditional love to show up and to keep trying and not give up the faith. But you had to, as you are coming into sobriety, you had to feel awful. You must have had regret and shame. And so how do you navigate that and get to a point where you feel like, no, I'm a good person. My life has value. I'm worthy of love.
I'm still working on that stuff. And I would argue probably most human beings are working on that as part of the human experience. I might be wrong about that. I will say when I initially got sober, though, like I think there comes a point where like you're just operating off ego because you have to be because you are so beaten down. So there's a lot of delusion. So I needed to first like understand how messed up like my psyche kind of was. And then just walking that out took some time. Like, oh, that's not true. That's also not true. You've been telling that story for 5 years and that actually never happened, right? So
Interesting.
You're kind of walking through some of that stuff. But
did you think of yourself as a victim?
I don't think I ever did. I mean, maybe sometimes. Sometimes. But like I had really big examples of like not being a victim. I can remember getting arrested with my friends at a young age. And, my friends were Black. I was white. We go down to Alder to juvie and they'd say, you don't belong here. You're going home. So it was pretty apparent to me like I was being given these opportunities throughout that maybe some of my friends weren't being given.
Yeah.
I think the biggest part for me to grapple with was I was terrorizing the people I loved.
Yeah.
Like people were actively getting restraining orders against me because I was unsafe to be around. And what I wanted out of life, all the dreams and aspirations I had, weren't just like squandered, they were like burnt down. Like I went over the bridge, I set it on fire, and then I paraded around it for like years. Like, oh, look at it burn. And that was tough to deal with. So I think when I came in and started to do the work and started to kind of, and the one thing about it is like, you don't think it's possible until, this goes back to the first question, the peer piece. Like you don't think it's possible until you met somebody that made it possible for themselves.
Okay.
And then you're like, oh, like this is actually doable. And you just slowly start to chip away at it. But today, like still, I mean, I'll sit with, like, I think I've come to a place where I know I'm good at my job. I know that, and I know I'm effective, but there's still pieces that I grapple with where I'm like, one of the things is like when I got sober, I just wanted to stop getting locked up. I didn't want to be homeless. Wanted a girlfriend, a car, you know what I mean, a job.
Yeah.
The amount of responsibility I have today because I'm living ethically with moral is way different. And we talk about that at Weld a lot. It's like, if you live this way, you're going to have more responsibility than you know what to do, like how to deal with. So like, we're going to talk about what that looks like. Because I think if you show up on time and you're honest with your word and you're capable and you're ultimately just showing up like a good person, like people are going to give you responsibility through that.
Right.
So that's some of the stuff I grapple with now. Is just the level at which I have so much responsibility. Also really grateful for it. And I know like if I'm not in gratitude, I need to be in humility and all the things. So I'd say, yeah, we still walk that out 12 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. Again, I think it speaks to your life's experience and having had to go through that, right? Creates this stronger person on the other side. And frankly, in many cases, stronger than your average successful citizen, because they weren't forged in the fire. And
I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, I read a book. I can't remember what it was. It might have been Rich Dad, Poor Dad from that author.
Did I write it?
You might have.
Yeah.
Did you write a book? I'll read it. I'll read it right now.
Yeah.
But he said like this guy was.
Got to get him to read a book first.
Yeah. I understand
got some
that's
books.
the progression.
I like it. There's some good books. That's what I do. Like when I check out, I'm just reading.
Have you ever noticed, like, this is my side, and then that's his side?
Oh, come on.
And actually, he did say, I put a book down there. He was like, why is there a book on my side? It's about policing.
I want to say, like, I am like our sides put together. That football right there. Oh, yeah.
Is that how you will make your little table in the middle?
I just want to see art football in the books. No, but he was saying like he invests in companies and he won't invest in a company where the person who owns the company hasn't filed for bankruptcy once before.
Oh, interesting.
And the reason is because he needs to know somebody is capable of going through adversity. And I think that's so brilliant. And we talk about it all the time, like it forged in the fire, like you said, and it doesn't have to define us. And that's a tough part to your previous question. It's like you can let those things define you.
Yeah.
I think it kind of makes you, right?
Yeah.
And like propels you forward. That's the hope. But don't let it define you. You
Yeah.
know? Not even my success. Like, sure, I want to be remembered and like, oh, Pat did great things. At the end of the day, what's most important to me is I want to be remembered as a good father and a kind human being, right? I think the adversity is just going to continue to propel people forward if given the right access to resources.
So what are you doing in Weld to promote those philosophies? Tell us what Weld is doing right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, we do a lot. There's rules first and foremost, right? So we when we meet with people, we talk to them. I mean, we embody what it looks like at Weld. Everyone, like, I'll use a house for an example. We'll have a house manager on site who's a member who exemplifies like what success looks like within the program. And then we'll meet with somebody and there's rules, right? And we don't force anyone to sign it. We're just like, hey, here's the rules. If you want in, this is what it looks like. This is a no-fly zone. Like, we're not going to actively use drugs here. We're not going to be in any dumb shit. You know what I mean? We're not mandatory reporters, but we're holding each other accountable. So have those conversations on the front end and then hold them accountable to those standards throughout the time that they're there. Also, access to the clinical case management team so people can have, because it's tough, you know what I mean? You do want, it's something I didn't have when I was walking all that out. I didn't have clinical case management, you know.
Did you know you needed it? I mean, did it occur to you?
I thought I needed so much when I got sober. Yeah. I was like, I'm going to need shock therapy. I'm going to need it all. You know what I mean? Because I had been court ordered since I was a kid to like do all these things. What happened for me, and this isn't everyone's story, is when the drugs and alcohol were taken away from me,
Mm-hmm.
things got better. And
Yeah.
like they got on the looking at me, they got better pretty quick. Internally, they got better as I started to practice what I was learning, which was like I hold myself in high esteem, meditate. I'm a big proponent of meditation, honesty.
Oh, same
yeah.
as you, huh?
When I'm not reading a book.
Me and you,
Yeah.
we're gonna meditate today someday. I'll come over here for a Seahawk.
Okay, there we go.
We will meditate in the commercial break.
Halftime.
Yeah. But just it's like doing stuff like that. But to answer your question, so there's the structure set up throughout. So like in house meetings on site, everybody's talking, they're checking in on goals. Here's my recovery goals. Here's my financial goals. Here's my career goals. Here's my spiritual goals, which is also an important part of the human experience. The workforce development and training looks much the same. It's like you can go to work. We're going to send you on site, but first you have to do this, this, and this to get there. The Weld Month is built around creating the community around people and the accountability so people can have honest conversations about what their experience looked like before and what they want their experience to look like in the future. And then throughout the process, like we're all just really trying to check in with each other throughout. And people know too, like
So that is the ultimate combination of community and accountability, right? Because you're speaking this publicly to people that are around you that know whether you're just shining them on or telling the truth or
right. And if people there's instances where like people will go back out, like, or they'll it's whatever, but it's usually like I made that decision, and we see a lot of people come back if that happens as well. But we want it to be a safe space for people to at least try.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, we will usually work with somebody again, depending on the circumstance. And it's not linear, you know, so there's contracts along the way and maybe more expectations attached to that individual throughout. People pay $600 to live with us. In most of our houses, we do have contracts with the county. We have a drug diversion court, behavioral diversion court, veterans diversion court. So we hold those contracts. So those look a little bit different, but kind of the same principles within the house as well.
So you are around policymakers a lot, elected officials a lot. You've been in this space for a minute. Comment on the disconnect between, people recommending investments and policies and writing policy and what you actually understand. Because I hear this frustration all the time. I had a friend recently that was like, okay, tell me what it was like when you kicked heroin. And the woman, this was an elected official, her response was, I have my own lived experience. It's different. And that I've heard is very aggravating, that you shouldn't be commenting on something that you really don't understand.
Yeah.
So what do you think the biggest disconnects are?
Between policymakers and people actively doing the work?
Yeah, or just, what is the assumption for people like
why
us
don't you
versus
get Patrick, who has a bunch of governmental interactions, to say negative things about
I don't mean that. Okay, let me say it this way. The general
I love my
public,
elected officials.
we
answer.
actually do have great support, and I think things are going really well right now. But I feel like, especially when I'm in academic circles, the disconnect between people doing this research and making recommendations, and then in practice.
I have an interesting answer to that, and it's not probably what you think, E. I have the elected officials, public sector, have been really good to work with.
Good.
Systemically, it's a different story because the systems in which are set up underneath the electeds, things can get really bogged down.
Yeah, what they inherited.
And they may have been set up in past administrations, and those are lifelong employees or at least 20-year employees, and elected officials come and go. But I've had pretty, good interactions. And we can I'm really lucky, like and I'm surprised I haven't said this before, like the success of Weld is really the team at Weld.
Yeah.
Like we have a I get to work with like people that like make me look far smarter than I actually am, and on a constant basis, where I'm always challenged at work and I'm always learning. So we can go into those rooms and be pretty compelling. I haven't had any elected official. Maybe I've had one or two, but for the most part, they're like, "Wow, how can we be supportive?"
Yeah, I think there's a lot of assumptions that are just not quite right. So we talked about Suboxone. That's one. That's one that this is a great solution. Use this for more like insulin, I think is how people are thinking about it. This is just a necessary mechanism.
Yeah.
But I haven't understood, I still don't understand, but I hear more accounts, how in corrections, people can be trained and conditioned to do what doesn't work actually.
Mhm.
And then you're supposed to re-enter. I mean, Jim is the first person who really talked about that. He said by the time, especially if you spend years in a space, he said, then suddenly you're back in community. You have no idea what a pro-social relationship is like. I asked for examples. It's like, well, what do you mean you're conditioned to do the opposite? And he said, eye contact, Amy.
Mhm.
You know, he said, you know that that's a thing and that that's a
Yeah.
thing that makes people trust you. And I would not have done that. I wouldn't have asked for help. You know, that would have gotten a bad
And
consequence.
just so people know, Jim is an employee at Weld. He served 23 years in the joint, and is a vicious advocate for people that are re-entering community from the legal system. And he's absolutely correct. I think the thing that sticks out the most to me, and at least, and I'll talk about housing just because we've been talking about it, is I want to articulate this carefully. This all-in attitude to certain modalities. Like we see that. It's like, oh no, we support this right now. And that's actually all we're putting our public support behind. Like when in fact there is, a lot of different people with different experiences, and I have my lived experience and you have your lived experience, whatever the case may be. There needs to be investment in like multiple modalities. And I speak for a population of people, like we're not even given the choice. Like if we want housing over the last, this has become really apparent over the last like 10 years, especially like, if I'm coming in and I need to be in sober living, like I can't even make that decision right now because none of the publicly funding permanent supportive housing units like actually mandate that.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like that where it's like, and I am all for permanent supportive housing.
Yeah.
I think everyone should have access to safe housing. What I would argue is that type of housing safe for people like me?
That's right.
If you have a communicable disease and you're no longer symptomatic and you're put into a place that people actively have that disease, the expectation would be that you would catch that disease again. So I think you really kind of need to, look at things from different perspectives when talking about that.
One of the things that I remember in talking with you previously about Weld is, and I think it's important sometimes just to get like break down to like the basics of the average person doesn't know that, you come out, if you've been in prison for any significant period of time, you may not know how to operate, how to interface on the internet with job opportunities.
Yep.
You may not know just the most basic fundamentals, catching a bus or
How to use a phone.
or how to sort of navigate all of these things that we take for granted. And then if that person doesn't have sort of support and a mechanism by which they can learn those things, then they end up recidivating. They're back doing what they know.
Mm-hmm.
They're back doing what they used to do, and they end up back in prison or back in jail and those kinds of things. So I want people to understand that sometimes it's just really, really basic stuff, like just teaching folks. You said earlier, be on time, conduct yourself with integrity.
We learned that like the hard way too. We're like, you got to be accountable.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, what's accountability, right? Like, you got to be dependable. I mean, people we had to actually like codify that, make it like how do we track dependability for people? So you really take a step back. But absolutely. I remember telling Bishop, who's a fantastic person that used to work at Weld, he's got his own organization now, but when he got out, he served 20 years in prison, and I told him to take a screenshot. And he looked at me. He's like, "Man, I'm not shooting anyone. I just got out of prison." And I was like, "No, it's come here, come here, dude. It's fun.
I'm not shooting anybody."
He's like, "That's not it." Yeah, he was, he's kidding, but it's like, and I would argue too, we reserve that for people that are incarcerated for long terms of time, but that's not the truth. Like people coming in at homelessness after 5 years, 4 years, like think about all the things that have changed. Like it's such a quick matter of time. I think there's an opportunity with AI. So we use AI at Weld to give people access to like a more equitable on-ramp, hopefully, with like resume building, treatment plans.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, AI will build you like a recovery plan. Like it's incredible.
Is that right?
Yeah, it'll do all sorts of things for you. So it's just like we've been trying to utilize that and tinker with it because I know there's a lot of fear around it taking away jobs, but I do think that it has the it may have the necessary ingredients to like create opportunity for people as well if they're utilizing it. Because you just type in like, please create resume, bow, you're good to go. It's something that people used to charge. I remember when I was looking for a job at one point, like I was still on drugs and I needed a resume and I didn't quite know how to put it together at the time. And this guy was like $450. And I was like, wow, it costs a lot of money to make a resume. I need a job. You know what I mean? That's not.
You need a job to make a resume.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but now it's just like that. You just so that the digital literacy class we do within Weld Month, we actually give people computers. So you learn how to use it, utilize it, AI, emails, screenshots. I mean, you name it. We're talking to people about it, and then they get to take it home and they actually get to embark on a journey with said device and hopefully have access to employment and all the things that come with having a computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So folks are going to Weld when they're either coming from homelessness or prison or jail.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? How long typically is the program? What is it that you hope for them before they move on to, and perhaps do they move on within Weld to help?
They have. I mean, I'd say, I don't know exactly. I'll say a lot of our employees are former Weld members. I mean, I'm thinking of one guy in particular, Ron. Ron he's our housing program manager, and man, he's just like, he's made for it. He's like, and he lived with us for years, but he was locked up all in New York. I don't want to get too much into his story, but let's just say from New York to Washington, like a storied history with the correction system and substance use disorder. And he has this sweet spot for helping guys. I mean, like, I can't go to the housing program, and he's rough around the edges. And I joke with him. I'm like, someday you're going to get me sued, bro. But just kiddingly, because he's not. But like, he's just an amazing, like, he is tailor-made for the work he's doing right now. And I'm so proud of him on a daily basis. So in his case, he was with us a while. He was living in a van on the street, before he came to Weld. And now he's doing exceptional work. Average duration, depends on the individual. What we're hoping for is like agency, autonomy. We use words like permanent housing and permanent employment because these are measures that the county wants to track and the state and the feds. What we are starting to track, because we want to change the narrative around this, because we know as people in recovery or people that have returned from prison, a far more accurate measure of where we're at, it's kind of going to show us where we're headed, is how we feel about our personal relationships. Am I going to make rent? Am I feeling fulfilled? Am I being honest with my partner? So we have this fulfillment scale that we do with our participants, just to track where they're at emotionally. Like if you feel like you can't make rent at the end of the month and you're not having any purpose in your relationship with your kids, like, okay, let's check in about this and have a conversation. It's probably far more accurate than just like the permanent employment or did I recidivate?
Yeah.
Did I relapse? Yeah. We track all that stuff. And ultimately, we want people to thrive. So what that looks like, we use the fulfillment modality. We're starting to track that. And were you able to move on and actually have agency in your life, get your own place, reunite with your family and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's so insightful. It's, have you changed the way that you see yourself? Mm-hmm. Have you changed the way you're thinking about these things or how you metabolize stress? We've talked to several people who relapsed after a pretty significant period of sobriety recovery because there was a catastrophic loss, and they were not prepared to navigate that grief and all the emotions, all the complex emotions that can surround it. And so do you guys work on that? Really focus on how do you sustain this?
It's funny because, somebody's actively engaged in the work they're supposed to be doing. What I often see anyway is they can go through catastrophic things and it's the little things that will can take someone out. That's not to say something catastrophic can certainly happen to an individual and derail them. But I mean, the way I usually talk about it is when things are good, really you're building a foundation for when that tornado's going to come, because that tornado's coming. It's coming for everyone. So big, deep conversations on what that looks like, and you want to build that foundation to build a beautiful life while you have the time and the ability to do it, and not wait for those moments. And the indicators are am I finding purpose in this? Is there direction? Am I being honest with myself? All those things. So how do we track that? The county and the city and the feds aren't necessarily interested in that data. So what we hope to do is change the narrative around it, but we also track the other things, like I said, which are, am I working? Did I get arrested? Have I used drugs? Do I have a place to live? So all of those are being tracked throughout the process.
So what is there anything that you want you don't want to get out of here without folks knowing what's happening with Weld or how they might help or
Yeah, how can people help? How can people support you? What can we advocate for?
I think there's a couple parts. I think one, just generally, I think I want people to understand that individuals can heal, and more importantly, that healed people heal people. And Weld is the embodiment of that work. And if you want to support, you can go to the website, you can go to the Instagram, you can follow our email newsletter. There's a lot of ways to get involved. You can volunteer. We take housing donations from developers. So instead of boarding up the houses, they can actually donate the house to Weld until the permits pop, and you can get a fair market rent write-off and a tax incentive for doing that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to get involved. And of course, my director of development would be mad at me if I didn't say this. You can give money to Weld. We are a 501c3. So, and that, I think we just ran an ROI this year. For every $1 that goes to Weld, we save taxpayers $15 annually.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's a pretty big return on investment.
I bet it's more than that, actually.
It's probably, I'm working on, I'm cooking something
Yeah,
up.
okay. I'll help with that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, but yeah, I just appreciate y'all. Yeah.
Well, look, you said it earlier, and it's worth repeating. Folks are going to get out of jail. Mm-hmm. Folks are going to get out of prison, and they're going to be walking around in community. Mm-hmm. And do we want those folks to transition to productive, healthy lives, or do we want them to just go back to the what got them in that predicament to begin with? And obviously the answer is we don't want folks to go back to that, because also the financial part of it is it also costs money. Mm-hmm. When folks are committing crimes and victimizing people and using drugs and going into jail. I mean, the judicial system, the police departments, the courts, the judges, the corrections folks, the processing, all of that stuff is extraordinarily expensive when compared to folks that are living productive lives, working, living, and you're also a great reminder that things can go wrong for a significant period of time, and you can turn it around and you can become the executive director of a major organization and a father and a husband and a good guy to be around. So, congratulations on that. I think the message that both your life story and Weld promote is exactly what we need to keep in mind, because we're going to be spending money in this area one way or the other. So we might as well be spending money on the things that change the course for us, instead of just wash, rinse, repeat folks in and out of jail indefinitely until they become a burden on the healthcare system that then is trying to take care of folks that are sick internally, mentally, and physically. So there's just so much positive that comes out of these rehabilitation programs that we'd all be better off if there was a lot more Welds running around.
I appreciate it. And with advocates like you two, we're going to do fine. So thank you for having us on, or having me on, and being able to talk about the work we're doing. And
we got to get Jim on too.
Jim should come on. Yeah. Bishop would
Carolyn
be great. You had Amy on, who I love. Yeah. I also wouldn't be sitting here without Amy King. She was, someone that saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And sometimes it takes that as well. I think we all have that probably in common in our stories. And she really empowered me to, do this work early on. Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, well, you've been Bombardened.
The Bombardened podcast is a Barden Squared production. Executive producers are Eric Barden and Amy Barden, and video and audio production of the Bombardened podcast is by Thread Theory Creative.